Good evening. Welcome to this series of teaching that I call Experiencing the Buddha's Teachings. And we are now on the topic of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is one way among many of describing the spiritual path in Buddhism, or the different factors or conditions that we need to gather or cultivate on the Buddhist path to enlightenment or freedom or liberation from suffering and the causes of suffering. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth item in the list of. Good evening, Craig. Yeah, in the fourth item in the list of the Four Noble Truths. So the Noble Truth of suffering, the causes or origin, source of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and now the path leading to cessation, the path leading to the stopping of suffering by stopping the cause of suffering. And as the name implies, there are 8 items. As you probably know by now, Buddhists or the Buddha maybe all started with the Buddha, and he loved to present things in lists. It's an easy way for us to remember things. So we have a list of 8 items, and I have covered the first 2. The first one is right view, and the second one is the right intention, or sometimes also translate as right thought. Right view has to do with the way I present it in this course as to do with understanding of conditionality, understanding things and events and happenings in terms of conditions. Yeah. Conditions is the word conditions here are used in a very general sense, not only in terms of causes, the causes that produce whatever result or effect, but can also refer to the different components or parts of a person, of a situation, of a relationship, of an interaction. So causes, parts, like also conditions can also refer to how we view a situation, how we come to see the situations, the different perspective, and different ways we come to label or designate the situations. So, so I'm using the word conditionality in a very, very broad sense. Yeah. And I'm saying that right view in this context can be referring to understanding things, situations, and happenings in terms of conditions. To have this is a very unusual kind of perspective, to see things in terms of conditions, to see happenings in terms of condition, to see results in terms of conditions. To take this particular perspective can be very helpful, and later we can revisit it again. So that is the right view. And previously I touched on right intention, which is based on our so-called right view, our understanding of the world, of ourselves in terms of conditions, come different motivating factors, motivations, different intentions that we are encouraged to cultivate. The 3 of them in this context: loving kindness, compassion, and renunciation. So it's almost like the more we see things in terms of conditions, the more we understand the world, ourselves, our experiences in terms of interdependent or dependence on different conditions, changing conditions, then we come to express that understanding or in express our understanding through the motivation or motivating factor of compassion, of love, or kindness, and of renunciations. For example, previously I talked about how love. Take the example of love. It is by paying attention to the conditions that support love, that allow us to be loving, to allow us to be able to express or to respond to situation and others from a place of love as opposed to a place of hatred. And the conditions, of course, is a sense of a relatedness with the other person, in the case of love, loving kindness. If I can relate to this person, then there's a better chance that it would bring forth this heartfelt feeling of love, as opposed to feeling alienated to this person, feeling that, oh, I can't relate to this person. This is a complete alien, completely unrelated to me. It's outsider. I don't need to care about this person. It's nothing to do with my life. And in those, under that kind of conditions, it is less likely for us to respond with kindness, with loving concern. And it's more likely, especially if we are hurt by such a person, to respond or react with hatred and anger. So love itself depends on conditions. And if we can nurture the conditions, then we will find that we are much more possible for us to respond from a place of love and kindness. So relatedness and the other conditions for love is very positive reciprocal interactions. So the more interaction I have with this person, and the back to and fro, the giving and the receiving, and if they are predominantly positive, not perfectly positive, but predominantly positive, nurturing, supportive, uplifting, then the closer I feel towards this person, we are bonded, so to speak, together, and the bond becomes more closer, the more there are such positive reciprocal interactions. And then naturally, without even any deliberation or consideration, we naturally find it so much easier to respond from a place of love, of concern, and kindness. So those two conditions are supportive of love. And you can understand it similarly for compassion and renunciation. In fact, the more we are able to see the world in terms of conditionality, in terms of interdependence, the more likely it is that we will be able to find that we will respond with these three different kinds of positive intentions, of kindness, of compassion, and of renunciation, which probably I need to explain a little bit. Renunciation is probably the most easy and widely misunderstood quality. Renunciation, another way of thinking of it, is the opposite of clinging or attachment. Attachment used in the Buddhist sense, where we sort of hang on to. We're not actually hanging on to a certain person or thing. We are actually hanging on to our ideas of that person, our image of that situation, our ideas of or ideal, so to speak. Our expectations, another way of putting it. We're hanging on to those ideas and renunciation is to see the situation, see the person as they are, and to let go of those unrealistic expectations, let go, or at least not hold so tightly, let go of hanging on to fixed ideas and ideals, so that we are able to respond instead to the actual situation as they are. So renunciation, as the opposite of attachment, is really to come into a kind of a more healthy relationship, with all the different things in our life. And renunciation comes also from the understanding of conditionality, especially from the understanding of change, that there is really no point in trying to hold on to something in order to make it constant, in order to make it fixed and unchanging, because that is not the reality, not the reality of the person, of the relationship, of the object, of the situation. Everything is changing, all the conditions are constantly shifting, changing, and therefore anything that is dependent on those conditions must also change. And there's no point to hold on to some maybe outdated ideas or expectations and insist that things should conform to those ideas. So we let go. And that is a very kind of brief way of talking about renunciation. For example, renunciation in terms of relationship is not so much that you cannot have relationship, Because whether you like it or not, you want it or not, we will have a relationship. So long as we are alive, we are relating. We're relating to the different people, the different sentient beings, relating to our environments. Yeah? We can't help it. There's no way we can isolate ourselves. We are bound to have relationships. So it's not about not having relationship. It's how do we act in those relationships? How do we relate? So we relate by recognizing, remembering impermanence, change, and we allow for that change. And we try to respond to those changes. For example, in a relationship with another person. So it's not to fixate our mind on this person, how they used to be, or how they should be, but to pay attention here and now to how they are in this moment and to interact with them from that point of view. So we renounce, we let go of our fixed ideas of this person. And we have many fixed ideas of, especially people close to us. Yeah? A lot of expectations, some of which are unrealistic, and a lot of ideas, a lot of which are our attempt to resist change. The most funny one is in Chinese drama. When I was growing up in Cantonese drama, yeah, this soap drama, yeah. There's always a scene of this person dying, on his or her deathbed, and the person around him be crying and saying, "Please don't go, please don't die, don't leave us, abandon us." I thought that was such an unfair thing to say to the dying person, the poor fella or whoever. They can't help it. They're dying. They didn't want to die, but here you are insisting that they are abandoning you because they are dying. They should, if they love you, stop dying and come back to life. And I thought that is a good example of how strong our attachment is, that we are making unrealistic demand on a dying person, that if they were to love you, they should stop dying and come back to life. How terrible it is if you are the one that is dying and you say, "But I can't do it. I can't do it. It's not because I don't love you, but I can't stop myself from dying." So renunciation is the opposite of that. It's to recognize that maybe in that situation, it's not so much about you as a person who has been left behind or abandoned, but why not think about the person who is dying and say, how can I support this person? How can I make this last journey of their life a much more pleasant one or comfortable one? What are their needs? How can I meet those needs in this moment, their last few moments of their life? So to think about them as opposed to about me, me, the one that's been left behind or been abandoned. Of course, it's natural for us to think like that, but the more we are able to internalize and understand renunciation, the more we are able to let go of our attachment. And in this instant, it will manifest as being more concerned of the person dying as opposed to ourselves, and to respond to their needs as opposed to being preoccupied with my needs. Okay, so today I want to touch on the next 3 items in the Noble Eightfold Path, which are related to the practice of ethics. So they are right speech, right action, which means right behavior, and right livelihood, which pertains to how we make a living, how we support ourselves in our daily life. So all 3 has to do with actions through verbal actions, physical actions through behavior. And so these 3 are related to the Buddhist practice of ethics. And I want to present these 3 together as to look at them as dependent, dependent on the first 2. So ethics in this context can be understood as how we make choices, choices in terms of speech, in terms of speech doesn't have to be verbal. These days, speech can be in terms of the different ways we communicate, through texting, messages, and so on and so forth. Yeah. How we act, make choices and act which is the domain of ethics, how to see that as dependent on and resting on the first two factors, on right view, the right understanding, and on the right intention of acting, making choices from motivated by love, loving kindness, compassion, and renunciation. And I'm going to explain it in this way, that saying that Buddhist ethics, one way of understanding Buddhist ethics, ethical practice, is to, instead of following a list, which I try not to, I don't like to have a list of do's and don'ts, right and wrong, and you just follow the list. And sometimes when I'm studying Buddhism in certain texts, they even make it into almost like a legal exercise. What are the criteria? Like for this right action, there must have 4 criteria. If you take all 4, then it's very right. You take 3, then you are okay, not so right. And if you take 2 of them, then it's half-half. Yeah. Instead of thinking that way, I thought, which of course the advantage of a list of do's and don'ts is so much easier to follow, right? It's so much easier to decide whether I'm right and you are wrong. It's always that way, yeah. But it's a bit less flexible, because there's no way the list can encompass all the vast variety of situations we find ourselves in. For example, one of them, which we're going to look at, is to not lie. One of the Buddhist precepts is to give up. Well, I train myself. I undertake the training to not tell lies, which I suppose is a pretty interesting exercise, to not tell lies. First of all, what constitutes lying? To what extent am I lying? And so there goes the kind of gray area, or the kind of how you define lying and so on. So in relation to that, I just relate an old story of mine, my own experience, something to do with this kind of like right and wrong and do's and don'ts. When I was studying, I went through a 7-year course on Buddhist philosophy, a master program on Buddhist philosophy in Italy. It's in part of the curriculum of this organization, the FPMT, Foundation for the Preservation of Mahayana Tradition. It's always a mouthful, yeah. This master program, as part of the program, we have to study some of the classics in Tibetan Buddhism, or Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. And so there's the kind of intellectual part. Then of course we have to do some retreat, meditation, the practical aspect. Then there's also one to do with behavior. And somewhere in the midst of the course, there's an added criterion for us to graduate, is that we need to do kind of anger reporting. I don't know why, of all delusions, and I have many delusions, we have to focus on anger, and we have to report. And we each have every month, I think, I can't remember. Yeah, we have a little piece of paper, and per week, the 4-week or 5-week in that month. And for each week, we have to write down how many episodes of anger, episodes where we get angry. And then it becomes an interesting exercise, which I observe in myself and in others. So this, of course, has related to ethics, because anger is the opposite of loving kindness and compassion. So the more often we get angry also means the more often we act from that anger, and in a way that, of course, can be harmful to ourselves and others. So it becomes a practice of mindfulness. Yes, it's wonderful. Except when you put it into actual practice, then it becomes a bit more complicated, a lot more complicated than you initially imagine it to be. First of all, how do you define an anger episode? Every single thought that is associated with anger, do I count it as one? Or an entire chain of thoughts, the whole hour of fuming is counted as one? And to make things worse, we actually have a criteria of pass and fail. And if you fail this particular anger reporting, you can't graduate. So there are a lot of things hinged on it. not only 7 years of study and 7 years of sacrifice, so to speak, that you may actually not graduate if you have too many anger episodes. So we all get pretty creative in the reporting, and not quite a few of us, I observe, give now return 0, 0, 0, 0, almost like saints, I have to say. For months and months, or the entire year is all 0. They never get angry. Why? Because somehow, somewhere in that rule book, anger is defined as the intention to harm. I still remember a conversation with my classmate. I was on the bottom of the stairs and he's on top of it. I was questioning him, how come his is all 0? And he says, I never have the intention to harm anyone. So there you go. So that is one way you can get out of it, by defining anger as, I understand, I'm not saying he's lying. I'm not saying he's lying, but he interprets that instruction as, to have a very clear intention to harm is a pretty strong negative thought. Right? And most of the time we are fuming, we are pissed off, we are frustrated, but we probably would not say, oh, I'm going to murder this person. So that's one way you can make a reporting out of it. I was unfortunate because I was going through some pretty rough spot through the course, and I was at one point, I have a lot of rage, and yet I want to pass, you see. So what I did is I just, to be honest, then I said, I report every episode, which is the word I use. An episode can last a very long time, right? And since given there are only 7 days in a week, you probably wouldn't do too bad. I don't get angry every day. And maybe I have a major episode once a week, and that will keep the number of reporting at a more reasonable level. So do you think that what we did with this anger reporting, are we lying or are we being truthful? Or maybe both of us are, and there are others who do other interpretations. Yeah, maybe we are all each in our own way being truthful to how we understand the instructions, and that makes it. That's what I'm trying to make. Sometimes it's really hard to say who is right and who is wrong, and who is ethical and who is lying. So I want to take a different approach. I think a more realistic, and really how I like to approach these questions of ethics is to not look at it as a list of rights and wrong, do's and don'ts, but instead go back to a first principle and try to consider what make an action maybe wholesome, and what influence the action and lean it towards unwholesome. And I say that we have to go and look at what is the view underlying it. Is that view one of right view, a view that accords with reality, or one that is deluded, that is completely contradictory to the reality of the moment of the situation? And on top of not only the view, but also the motivating factors. Is that action, or was that action done motivated by kindness, by compassion, by renunciation, or was that action done clearly motivated by the opposite, by hatred, by cruelty? The opposite of compassion, you can say, is cruelty or harmfulness, the harmful intent, or by attachment. And look in this way, it gives us a sense that maybe those actions that are on the basis of right view and right intention are more conducive to happiness, and those that are on the basis of wrong view and wrong intentions are more conducive to suffering. And precisely because of this reason, we motivate ourselves, we incline ourselves to go away from wrong view and wrong intention towards right view and right intention. That's how I like to think of ethics. So let's take a look at right speech first. And I need to refer because it's always a bit tricky. Right speech. What are the Buddha's advice in terms of right speech? Of course, there is a list of 4 so-called wrong speech: lying, harsh speech. Harsh speech is speech that are meant to hurt other people. So harsh speech can sound very sweet and nice, but it's aimed to hurt other people. That is also counted as harsh speech. It doesn't always have to be loud or abusive. It can come across as very polite, but nonetheless hurtful. That is considered harsh speech. The third one is called divisive speech, speech that is meant to divide people, make them not harmonious, or to keep people separate. So instead of bringing people together into mutual understanding, we try to keep them as enemies. Yeah. And the last one is sometimes translated as idle gossip. Idle gossip is, strictly speaking, speech that increase ours or another's delusions, make us more deluded, so to speak. Yeah. Idle gossip doesn't necessarily mean, at least for me, it doesn't mean that every word that comes out of your mouth must be deeply meaningful and deeply full of love and compassion, and you must not talk about nothing, so to speak. Yeah. Talking about whether it's not about wasting time. Actually, in fact, a lot of our speech, of course, is not necessarily the most constructive or meaningful, but nonetheless, it's important to engage in such interaction. So just this a little bit on this idle gossip. Towards the end of my father's life, he had some kind of cognitive impairment. A lot of the conversation I have with father is really about nonsense because he can't remember. His short-term memory is more or less gone. So we will talk about things that is there's no fact involved because dad cannot remember anything at all. About lunch, about breakfast, about what happened to the people around. He was in a nursing home. Yeah. So we have a lot of conversation, of which none of it is factual, and there's nothing terribly informative about those conversations. And I find that it's important for me to make the conversations. In fact, I actually have a list of questions that I just keep asking him every time I visit him. And that's just to fill up the space and just to have some interactions. But I find that those are very meaningful. Meaningful in a deep way, because speech is a way we connect with others. And it's through engaging in this completely meaningless and almost strange conversations, of which none of it is factually accurate, that I make my attempt to connect with my father. And for me, I think it's perfectly fine. I mean, it's just two human beings sitting together and just talking about almost nothing. But nonetheless, it is important. Yeah. So that kind of conversation, on one hand, is idle gossip. It's perfectly idle and it's just about nothing of any substance and importance. And sometimes it's literally gossip. Oh, what happened to that person on that bed? Because the nursing home is almost like a ward. Yeah. Oh, that was it. He's dead. He's gone for so long. He's for sure the person is dead. I say, oh no, dead. No. Maybe they're just in the hospital. No. It's dead and gone. Oh, the business is very good in the nursing home. When the bed is empty, another occupant will come in. Yeah. So things like this, which you probably call it gossip. Yeah. But for me, I think it's actually very important. In fact, I quite often say that a community of people that does not gossip may not actually be a community. I mean, I'm just joking. What I mean is by gossip, I mean people who exchange news and informations and stay connected with one another. Not just about all the serious, important things, but about little nothing, just almost like nothing. But the fact that we communicate, we share, and we learn about others helps to bring us together and bond us together. And that becomes, that's truly a community. John McEnroe says anger was a way of overcoming his nerves on the tennis court. Could be true. Anger could be a way of motivating a change. Sometimes we wouldn't make any change or do anything. We don't step out of our comfort zone if we are not angry, because anger is quite often for a lot of people a source of energy. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best way to go about doing things or go about effective change. In bringing about change. Because anger quite often have a harmful aspect to it, can be a hurtful aspect to it. And the more we sensitize ourselves to the different aspects of not only the conditions, but also the effect of our actions, we need to take that into consideration and ask ourselves, well, is there another way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Do I necessarily have to be angry in order, in this case, overcome one's nerve? Is that the best way, anyway, so to speak? Yeah. Okay, so let me just briefly touch on the Buddha's advice on right speech. And the Buddha gave it's almost like 5 questions to consider when we want to reflect on, is that right speech or not? Right can also, instead of thinking of right and wrong, and think of it as wholesome speech, beneficial speech, helpful speech. So the Buddha said, we can ask ourselves, do I speak at the right time or not? So timeliness is a consideration. There's a right time, a good time to talk about something, and a bad time to talk about the same thing. Yeah. So timeliness is something to take into consideration. Do I speak of facts or not? And this is to do with the truth, the factual content of the speech. Is what I'm saying factually accurate, or am I just making things up? Yeah. A lot of jokes are not really about facts, right? Yeah. When I first landed in Australia, not long after that, I was introduced to the drop bear of Australia, which is one of those peculiarities of Aussie, I suppose. Yeah, and of course, it's not factually accurate, but nonetheless, it can be. I don't actually think it's funny, but I don't know. But something. Not everything we speak are necessarily factually accurate and not funny. I was puzzled by this whole thing, this drop bad thing when I first landed. But anyway, so first is timeliness. Second is factual. Is it factual or is it true? And third one is, do I speak gently or harshly? How do I speak? How do I communicate? Am I communicating in a strong way, or does it come across as harsh or even aggressive? Or do I adopt a gentle way, or softly? So something to think about. Do I speak profitable words or not? Or maybe beneficial words or not? No, and what I'm saying, is it helpful or beneficial, or is completely useless? So that is also another thing to consider. I will repeat that, don't worry. Do I speak with a kindly heart, or am I being malicious? So our motivation for that speech. Do I speak from a place of loving kindness and compassion, or I speak from a place of harmful intent that I want to hurt somebody? And so these are just some. I'm sure it's not all the possible criteria we can come up with, but it might be just a short list to start thinking about speech. So instead of, which is why I find it helpful to think in this way, as opposed to say lying is wrong. Yeah, I'm not disputing them, but life is complicated. And there are many occasions where we need to weigh the different conditions. Not necessarily we have the time, but we need to respond, and so maybe we need to take into consideration the context and all the different conditions. And I prefer to approach this topic of ethics or right speech in this case by considering the conditions of each situation, each context, and who is involved. Yeah. Then I can ask myself, is this the right time to say this or not? Is this what I'm saying factually correct? Or maybe I'm just making things up? Am I doing it in a gentle way or a strong way? Is what I'm saying helpful or not, beneficial or not? And lastly, where does it come from? Where does that speech come from? Does it come from a kind place, a loving place, compassionate place, or actually deep down, beyond the facade of political correctness, or beyond the facade of being beneficial or helpful, deep down, maybe there's something else motivating it. Maybe there's selfishness. Maybe there is an intention to hurt. So we have to take into consideration. Don't worry about the list. Just different conditions, and I think that way it gave us a more complete picture and help us to make to evaluate and come to our own conclusion about what our speech is really wholesome or not wholesome. Okay, so I'm not sure whether I'm making myself clear, but again, as we are live at this moment, feel free to write your comments and feedback in the live chat. I thought before we continue on, and also I want to do a meditation, I want to share a poem that when I came across it in an old issue of the Buddhist magazine called Tricycle, I was very touched by it, and I said, "Oh, that's exactly what I was trying to articulate, and what I feel within myself." So I thought to share it. I'm not actually a good reader, but I would like to share with you. The poem is called "The Place Where We Are Right." Yehuda Amiche. I think it's Jewish. Yeah. The place where we are right. Yeah. So this idea of being right, being right as opposed to wrong, being right give us a sense of certainty, almost confidence. I'm right, and I always find that there's something dodgy about that. Yeah. So I'll just read this. Yeah. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. The place where we are right is hard and trampled, because when I'm right, of course I'm right. If you're different from me, you're wrong. So rightness can bring a sense of certainty, but also a sense of inflexibility, because it's so much important to be right that we stop looking, we stop listening, we stop willing to consider complications, we stop to consider changing conditions, because that makes things complicated, isn't it? Then I might not be 100% right, I might be 95% right or 90% right. That would be troublesome, isn't it? I want to be right, 100% right, so that I can be sure, I can be certain, I can be confident, and I don't have to worry about all these other different circumstances. That's your problem, not mine. Mine is very simple, clear cut. I'm right and you are wrong, and that's the end of the story. And where the place where we are right is often very hard, very solid, very trampled. Nothing will grow from such a place, from such a heart. Whereas if we have doubts and we have love, we have all this uncertainty, confusion sometimes, not even know, unsure, am I doing it right? Am I being helpful, or am I making things worse for myself, for those that I love? Doubts and loves dig up the earth. The hard yard was dug up like a mole or plow. And once again, as the soil is loosened, beautiful things can come out of it. Of course, it's a lot more messier. It's definitely not as neat as a paved or cemented yard. There will be no weed because everything is paved over with concrete. Yeah, it's very neat, very clean, but it's of course nothing can grow. Right? And at a place where, for me, I really like this image, that is a lot messier, but it's also how I see my work, my life. That a lot of times we have to act, we have to make choices. We never know beforehand whether it's right or wrong. I mean, who knows? Like my friend was trying to buy a new property, an investment property. Who knows whether it's going to make money or you're going to get yourself into financial problems? Of course, we try, but we never know whether it is right or wrong ahead of time. Likewise, in the area of ethics, how do I know that this speech that I'm going to say, is it right speech? Is it wrong speech? I mean, I try to be right. I try to be helpful, try to be wholesome, but who knows? And sometimes the words are already out of my mouth before I know it, before I'm mindful of it. So I like to think of ethics not as having a rule book and we're trying to follow it and we're trying to, like a legal way, try to interpret all the rules and the do's and don'ts and the different exceptions. Instead, I prefer a more messy way, as ethics, as sensitize ourselves to changing conditions. And the more we are in touch with the conditions and be open to that, and the more we are able to take the risk, and allow something to come from the heart, allow the response to come from our natural love, compassion, our renunciation. And of course, I don't know what form it would take. I cannot be absolutely sure that the effect, short-term, long-term, is necessarily good, but nonetheless, I have to chance it, I have to risk it. So back to speech, which is why I say that sometimes we engage in, take the example of idle gossip. So I'm actually quite encouraging of people to have this kind of gossip is actually a very judgmental term. Just have this kind of small talk. Nothing terribly meaningful and terribly serious. Just passing back and forth different informations. They're not necessary and may not necessarily be 100% true, but just maybe rumors and so on. But it's not so much the factual content of that conversation, but the fact that we converse is the way we connect. We connect with one another, hopefully from a place of kindness, of concern, caring, and that's how we come closer together, by just having all these interactions. And I really resist labeling such conversations as idle gossip, because I think that's why I was saying, a community that doesn't gossip may not actually be a community. I mean, most probably I'm wrong, but I'm just trying to make a point that sometimes in terms of speech, it's good not to try to always stay on this high moral ground. Instead, you might find yourself very unloved by people around you. So that, oh my God, I don't want to talk to this person. Everything I say, they sort of like I've been judged as if I'm a gossiper. I'm just passing around idle information. Instead, to come down and to connect with others on a more mundane, ordinary level, heart to heart, and just be more sincere and genuine, so to speak. Okay, so that is just my presentation of right speech. I'm not going to go into detail of what is right action. Traditionally, right action is 3, or the wrong action is the opposite: killing, stealing, and engage in sexual misconduct. These 3. Of course, the right action would be the opposite of those 3. And also right livelihood. Again, there is a list. I think there are 5 of them. Any livelihood involve weapons is considered a wrong livelihood. Involve killing is considered a wrong livelihood. Involve stealing is wrong livelihood, so to speak. That idea. But I thought that way of looking at it is may not be helpful, because in our modern world, our modern society, our modern world, our modern economy is so complicated. The divisions of labor is so, and also the labor is divided not only within the country now, it's throughout the entire world. And so we are so much more interconnected and interdependent on one another. To make a single, like my mobile phone, who knows, all the bits and pieces involve people maybe from different parts of the world, miles and miles apart. And so a single action, a single object action is involves so many people, and involve the livelihood of so many people. So if instead of a mobile phone, if this is something a bit more harmful and involve hundreds and thousands of people, are all of them involved in wrong livelihood? So I think it gets a bit difficult in that way to draw lines, to draw clear boundaries. Instead, why not come back and look at then action from the point of view of where it come from? Is it based on right view? Is it based on come from a place of right intention? And maybe that is another way of looking at it. I took this idea from this teaching, but also from a book written by the Dalai Lama quite a number of years ago. Ethics for the New Millennium was a book published around the year 2000, where the Dalai Lama expressed his vision of secular ethics. He is interested in this idea of ethics from a secular perspective, or maybe I should say non-religious perspective. Not only confined within like a religion like Buddhism, but how do we think about and express ethics in a broader context among different people in the society. So in that book, he touched on this idea of ethics on the basis of wisdom and kindness, or at least that's how I remember it. I'm sure I quote him wrongly, but it's along that line. Because wisdom, understanding reality, and loving kindness, compassion, these are universal things, not confined to any one particular religious group and so on and so forth. So with wisdom, compassion, and bringing that into each situations, and on the basis of that to make the choice to speak or not to speak, to act or not to act, to engage in this line of work or not. It's become the foundation of how we understand ethics. Okay, so I thought we can do a meditation, not directly related to right speech, right action, and right life. These are things that we do most probably outside of meditation. These are things that, of course, they help if we bring mindfulness to them. We become more mindful of our speech, of our actions, our choices, of our livelihood, what is involved in as we go to work, so on and so forth. But I thought to do a meditation related to renunciation, because renunciation is probably one of the intention that is harder for us to wrap our mind head around. One of the things that really facilitate us, even if you don't know this word renunciation, that facilitate this process of letting go of attachment is to become more mindfully aware of change, to not only acknowledge the fact of change, but to let it into our awareness, so that we start to see things from the point of view of change. We start to be aware of change, and almost like we take change into consideration. When we view things or when we respond to things, and so this become a basis for us to develop this intention of renunciation. And even if you don't use the word renunciation, even we may not heard of it, or we may not know what it refers to, the more we are aware of change, the easier it is for us to let go of our grasping on fixed ideas, grasping onto permanence, grasping onto constancy. So it has a natural effect of helping us to ease up on our grasping, ease up on our attachment. And when we are less attached, when we grasp more lightly, which means we are more renounced, you'll find that that also influences how we act, what are choices we make. Yeah. And so I thought you can spend a few minutes meditating on sensitize ourselves to change. And the way I do it is not so much asking you to reflect or think about change, but to ask you in this meditation to just become more aware of how things in your experience are changing. So this is a meditation on listening. So I'm going to invite you to listen first to the sound in your surrounding or the lack of it. If it's very quiet, that's also fine. We listen. And we bring that same quality of listening into listening to our own body. Our body makes sounds, of course, but not so much that. But the body is in different states of tension or relaxation, tightness and looseness, hardness, softness, warmth and coolness. And to listen, as in be attentive to the state of our body. And then, of course, naturally, that leads us to be attentive to the state of our mind, to the kind of thoughts, to the kind of feelings or emotions that we might be experiencing in this meditation. Maybe no strong emotion, or maybe there are. You are upset about something during the day, and now in your meditation, that whole incident come back to mind. As we meditate, the thoughts flowing through us, the memories, and also the emotions that triggered. So we can listen to that. And as we are listening, I invite you to listen with a kind of added awareness of how things are changing. Bodily sensations are changing. One moment might be tight, and after a few minutes, you relax. How incredible it has changed. Listen to sound. Sound is constantly changing. Even if we want to hold on to it, we can't. That is true for pleasant sounds, unpleasant sounds, neutral sounds. One of their characteristics we notice is they change. So sound change, bodily sensation change, feelings comfortable, uncomfortable also change. Thoughts are constantly changing. Yeah. Emotions are changing. So as the more we are aware of our experience and the fact of change, the more we familiarize ourselves with it, you will find that not immediately, but after a period of time, you start to consider change while you're thinking about a situation where you're reflecting on yourself. You take into consideration the fact of change. And the more we are aware of it, the easier it is for us to let go of our grasping. The easier it is for us to embody the intention of renunciation. So let's do a meditation on that and guide you through it, just to explore mindfulness of change. So I invite you to find a comfortable meditation posture. Take care that the spine is comfortable in this position, upright if you are sitting. And you're, of course, most welcome to lie down, lie on your back in the supine position. And in that case, make sure that the spine is straight. If you're lying down, especially take care that the two areas, the neck and the lower back, are comfortable in that posture, that your posture has not introduced additional stress or tension into these areas. Rest your arms and hands on some kind of physical support so that you can allow your shoulders to be as relaxed as they possibly can. Feel free to close your eyes completely if you find that helpful, or you can leave them open or half open, whichever way you are used to. So let's give the body a few moments to adjust, to find its way into the meditation posture. Most important aspect of the posture is we want to assure our body that it is well supported in the posture with a sense of balance and safety. And when that message gets through to the body, to the brain, so to speak, a natural process of loosening up can begin and continue. The body may realize that it does not have to be so tight and tense. It can unwind a bit and let go of some of those unnecessary contractions and tightenings. So much so that given time, the body can actually settle down comfortably into this posture. So here I invite you to make use of your breath, the natural breath sensations as support for your attention. By that I mean you can invite your attention to come back here and now and notice the breath sensations. Notice the in-breath and the out-breath. So don't feel that you need to fixate your attention on any particular spot. I mean, you can if you want to. But instead, maybe you can try just be aware of that entire wave-like movement of the breath as you breathe in and out. Breath sensations can be noticed and be aware of at different parts of the body, maybe around the nostrils, maybe at the chest, a sense of expansion and contraction of the chest. And maybe also at the abdomen, a movement of rising and falling. So see if you can tune into some of these sensations of the breath. At least for the first few minutes, attending to the breath, using the breath as a support. See if you can give special attention to the out breath. Breathing out is an opportunity to release. So each time you notice an out breath, think of it as a chance for you to release, for the body to release some of the unnecessary tension, for your mind to release or put aside thoughts, memories, fantasies that are not related to the meditation. So coming back to the breath sensations, especially when we become aware that our attention is drawn elsewhere, don't feel that you need to somehow fix attention on the breath. Instead, think of the breath, at least in this case, as a place where you can invite your attention to come back to. Come back to the breath. Notice especially the out breath. And see if you can facilitate the deepening of release. And as we attend to the breath, as we come back to the breath, breathing out, releasing, facilitate the settling down of the body to the release of tensions, and maybe a lot slower, the settling down of the mind by releasing the thoughts, letting go of those thoughts. Naturally, things are slowing down, things are quieting, become more quiet. And now maybe you become aware of sounds in your surrounding, sounds that we may not be so aware of previously. So as we Come back to this moment, attend to the breath. See if you can also, in a very gentle, natural way, listen and be aware of sounds in the surrounding. You don't have to do anything extra. Simply allow the sounds to come to you. Listening is a very spacious mode of awareness. There's nothing we can do to focus it. There's nothing we can do to create sounds. All we can do is to settle back, open up, be aware, be present, and allow the sounds, if there are any, to come to us. So see if you can be this listening awareness, this listening space within which you welcome and notice any sounds outside of us, within us, sounds that somehow reverberate through space and become aware, that we become aware of, that appear within our awareness. See if you can retain that spacious quality of listening, of being open, spacious, welcoming, and aware. So while listening, for example, hearing my voice, not only will you notice that you are aware of sounds, but maybe alongside the sounds, you're aware of bodily sensations, such as the sensations of your breath flowing in and out, and other bodily sensations, almost as if you are listening to what your body has to say to you in the form of tension and relaxation, in the form of feelings of comfort or discomfort, area of tightness or looseness. Coming back to here and now, coming back to this listening mode in which we are aware of sounds, we are aware of the breath flowing in and out, we are aware of bodily sensations. See if you can also notice sensations in the face. Are you tensing up unconsciously any of the muscles of your face, tightening the muscles of your forehead, or those in the jaw, or the muscles around the eyes? And if you are, see if is it possible for you consciously to relax some of those facial muscles. Allow the whole face to be softer, to feel more relaxed, more at ease. And as we continue to come back, invite attention to be back here and now, to notice sounds, to notice breath, and anything else. See if you can, without making much effort, don't have to try harder, notice change, how the sounds are changing, appearing, disappearing, how the breath is changing, alternating between in and out, how the sensations in your body are changing, such as the face, softening or tightening. Of course, by now you notice thoughts. Thoughts may arise. You may find yourself distracted by them. So see if you can also listen to your thoughts. Become aware when your attention is caught up in thinking, caught up in the thoughts of the past or future, thoughts of inner commentary, inner conversation, or fantasy. Also become aware when you take your attention out of that thought and return the attention here and now to the sounds, to the breath, to the body. Coming back to here and now, returning our attention to listening, to the listening mode, so much so that within the space of our awareness or consciousness, we are aware of sounds, we are aware of breath, we are aware of the body, bodily sensations, and we are aware of our thoughts. And hopefully we may notice now and then, become aware, we recognize change, how our thoughts change, how what we are aware of change, and how the things that we are aware of are also changing. Coming back to the present moment, you can make the breath a support, you can make the sounds in your surrounding a support, you can make bodily sensations a support. We come back here and now, and we step out of our thinking world, the world of fantasy, of memories, and come back here and now, and in the midst of it, see if we can sensitize ourselves and notice change. The change is with us at every moment. Change is the constant. Bodily sensations change, sounds change, feelings change, thoughts also change. Okay, so there's a simple awareness meditation where try to draw your attention to the fact of change. The fact of change also dictate why I prefer to approach these three factors of right speech, right action, and right livelihood in such a, I can say, a kind of vague way, instead of listing out what is right speech, what is wrong speech, what is right action, wrong action, right livelihood, wrong livelihood in a list of do's and don'ts. I prefer to talk about it in this way of looking at the conditions of each situation we find ourselves in. Well, realistically, we can't do that for every moment, every choice we need to make. But at least the idea is because things change, and in order for us to respond appropriately and helpfully for each situation, we need to not, instead of relying on a fixed list to look at that situation, look at the change of that situation, the conditions of that situation, and make our choice based on that awareness, the awareness of the reality of that moment. And instead of trying to apply a kind of advice, this is advice or do's and don'ts, to take that into consideration, of course, but also to take the consideration the actual situations and the complexity of the situation. So as I just briefly touch on in terms of right speech, the Buddha offered these 5 questions. It doesn't have to be 5. You can have a longer or shorter list. Ask ourselves, is this the right time or good time to talk about this or not? Is this what I'm talking about? Am I staying to the facts, or am I exaggerating or whatever? It's what I'm going to say. How am I going to say it? I'm going to say it gently or strongly, or harshly or whatever. And is it helpful? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's better to just keep quiet. And the last one is, where does it come from, the speech? Am I sure that it comes from a good place, one of kindness? Or is it come from not such a good place, something malicious is going on inside here? And I often joke that when people new to Buddhism, I say, we Buddhists, we can also be vicious if you step on our toes. Yeah? Because we might have an image on our mind, or Buddhists should be like this, Buddhists should be like that. In fact, one of my previous jobs, one of my boss said, this person is Buddhist, he or she should not do this, should not behave like that. That is a good opportunity for me to tell my boss, my ex-boss, we Buddhists, we can also be vicious, depending on the situations. So I hope that instead of, so what I've done is instead of giving you a kind of certainty that you are right, because you have these do's and don'ts. I hope I've given you uncertainty, because this is the poem I quote. I think that to always be right, or to be so sure that you are right, is not always a good thing. It actually, being right actually sort of make things hard, a ground that's been trampled and really packed down. And it's not actually a good place for beautiful things to grow. And instead, doubt not in the sense of being confused, but doubt in the sense that you're always willing to double check again, always willing to take a closer look, pay attention. Doubt, and also our love, our love for the person, our genuine concern for the person or the situations. So much so that we are willing to take a closer look, or maybe to stop and listen, instead of being too much of a hurry to pass judgment, or to form opinions, to be open and to listen. I think these are actually the source, the place where we can grow something really wonderful and helpful. And so I think ethics is better to come from a place of doubt and love, and therefore a willingness to pay attention, to listen to understand the complexity of the situation, and then to make our choices on the basis of that, as opposed to immediately fall back on, because it's easy to fall back on the do's and don'ts, fall back on a standardized list of right and wrong, and on our fixed and established interpretation of right and wrong. Like the story I told you about anger reporting. If I say that my definition of anger, actually not my definition, but if I interpret the definition of anger as intention to harm, and I say, I never think of harming anybody. I'm such a nice person. I would never harm anybody. And therefore, for 7 years or how many years we've been doing a reporting, I can always put a 0. I will now return to my anger reporting. Definitely it's not true. Yeah, my number will go up and down depending on my mood, and so not saying that there's anything malicious about that, but that sometimes it helps instead of falling back and holding on to a fixed definition, to look at the actual situation itself and to ask, hey, is this anger? Am I angry? And often I say, yeah, I think I'm pretty pissed. Yeah, so I just have to put a mark and count that as one anger episode. Yeah. So we still have some time. If you have any questions, please feel free to write it in the live chat or comments or feedback. And so, for example, if we were to apply, don't mind me, you just type if you want to, okay? If you want to apply the similar ideas to right actions, it's the same, right? Take the example of killing. It's so easy to just say, oh, killing is wrong. Full stop, period. Life is so simple, so certain. It's much easier to feel confident I'm right if I just follow this simple line that killing is wrong. Unfortunately, in life, things are always complicated. What happens if your house is infested with cockroaches or rats or whatever not, and you simply can't live with it? What are you going to do? Are you going to kill or not kill? And what sort of rationale are you going to come up with? Rationalization you're going to come up with? Or we can just simply put aside, not saying they're wrong, but put aside that and just think, okay, let me look at the situation, let me put the different conditions into consideration and make a choice. And also to acknowledge that our choice of that moment may actually not be the right thing or the perfectly right thing, but it's the one that I can make or I have to make. It's what I can make in that moment. And in that way, even though I'm not perfectly right, I actually think that that is the way to approach this whole topic of ethics. Yeah, because I go back to first principle. I go back to my understanding of right view. I go back and ask myself, am I trying to come from a place of right intention, of kindness, of compassion, of renunciation? Yeah. In fact, this is also an interesting thing with compassion. Let's say, a lot of time we act from compassion based on a list in our head. If I'm compassionate, this is what I should do. This is what I should not do. So it's up in the head. This is our image of compassion. This is our ideal of compassion. It's not a good place. It's not. I wouldn't suggest you to do that. Yeah, because then a day will come when you find that, hey, something is wrong. Something is wrong here. I'm being compassionate, and how come I'm so unhappy? I don't feel nurtured or nourished. And there's a deep conflict starts to develop. Then I would say that that's because the so-called compassion that we are acting from is up in the head. It's a list of expectations that we have. It doesn't come from the heart. It doesn't come from the heart. Unfortunately, it's not as precise as the head, so to speak. Acting from the heart of compassion. Sometimes the heart doesn't respond with compassion. There's also another problem. I should be compassionate, but actually I don't feel anything. I'm actually feeling very impatient. I'm feeling I'm not confident. That is also a hard thing to swallow, to recognize that I may not be that compassionate. At least not in accord with my image. But if we are able to harmonize the two, not just the head but the heart, but together, then we will find that we are much better able to act from a genuine place of a heartfelt compassion, and we will suffer less of that kind of conflict of why I'm trying my best to be compassionate, and yet I'm so deeply unhappy, or I'm burnout, that something seems to be wrong, or there's this term called compassion fatigue. Not a Buddhist term, it's a modern term of how people feel stretched and overwhelmed beyond their capacity to be compassionate. And a lot of that has to come from this idea of acting from our idea of compassion. I mean, I don't mean all the cases, but quite often that is the case. We have certain expectation of what it means to be compassionate, and we are trying desperately to live up to those expectations of ourselves, where maybe actually deep down in our heart, there are many occasions maybe we just have to actually acknowledge that I don't feel particularly compassionate today, and actually I don't want to do it. I want to say no. I'm too tired. No, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way of responding to this situation, but sometimes simply acknowledging the fact that I can't find that compassion in my heart. I'm actually exhausted. I'm actually tired and frustrated. All I want to do is to go home and sleep or whatever. Yeah. Sometimes maybe acknowledging those limitations, and then making the choice to honor that limitation and just say, no, look, I'm sorry. Although if I'm truly compassionate, I would say yes, but I'm not particularly compassionate today, so I'm going to say no. Maybe that might be the so-called right choice in that moment, because in a way it is honest to oneself, honest to how we feel in that moment. Not very noble, I have to say, but then again, we are not saints, and maybe if we approach it that way, we are better able in the long run to slowly, gradually develop our compassion. Slowly, gradually, we may actually able to arrive at a place that correspond to what we expect of ourselves, but not immediately, but after a period of time, after a particular journey, before we can arrive at the place of being truly, genuinely compassionate in most situations. All right, so that's all the time I have. I hope I have not confused you more, introduce more uncertainty, even though that's my intention. I don't want you to leave this class feeling that you know absolutely what is right and wrong. That would be terrible, in my own opinion. But I would like you to be willing to be uncertain, to have doubts, and yet to honor love and kindness in our own heart, and to approach each situation by be sensitized to the conditions to change, and then on that basis, with wisdom and kindness, to make our choice to the best of our ability. Right. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good week ahead, and hope to see you here next week. Good night.